What is going on, you guys? Welcome back to the channel. It has been quite a while since I've uploaded a video. Had a lot going on, went on a honeymoon, still have a whole video to document that in our TRD Pro 4Runner that we got from a follower actually here on the channel, or on Instagram rather. So that's a whole video I got to put together, but today I wanted to put together a video that surprisingly I haven't put up yet. I've answered a lot of these questions that I'll be covering about my wheel, tire, and suspension setup in the past, but I figured I'd do a dedicated video for you all because I get the most questions in comments on videos that have the information on them. So that's telling me that they're either not watching the full video through, or that simply they're just coming by and they want to know. So anyway, this video is for you. I'm going to be covering everything from my suspension to my wheel and tire setup, and why I think this is my personal opinion. I think it's the best for anyone who dailies their overland built Toyota Tacoma. So let's get into the video and get into all the nitty-gritty details. Before we kind of get into the nitty-gritty details, I wanted to provide a little bit of a backstory here. So my name's Nick. I run the channel on Instagram, on YouTube, Quicksand Taco. This is my 2019 Tacoma TRD off-road. I've been building it over the course of the last, I don't know, 5 years. I got it Christmas Day 2018. So there's a lot of videos out there about the new Tacoma. This one's not going anywhere. I love this thing. It's in the color, the trim, everything about it is exactly how I wanted it. I spec'd it out when I first got it, and I've loved it ever since. But the biggest thing that I get asked the most is, Nick, what is your wheel and tire setup? So let's get into that. All right, let's get into the details. I will say in this video, I am going to be kind of calling out why I think this is the best setup for a daily driven overland vehicle. I will cover some of the things that some people might argue with, saying, oh no, you know, I run 37s, I'm re-geared, blah, 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 blah. I try to make this build as cost effective as possible. And so for me, this is honestly the most ideal setup. I spent a lot of time researching what I wanted out of performance off-road, what I wanted out of performance on-road, and so this is kind of where I landed. So these are the Icon Vector 6 wheels. They've been for about 5 years now, give or take. They are they are a 17 by 8.5 zero offset. Now I know you can go with another wheel that's maybe a higher offset, because and we'll get to that. I ended up with a higher offset, but for the process of how I was building this out initially, that is the perfect size tire for just a simple, level kit, or, where you add just, 61 12s in the front like we used to have, and an add a leaf in the rear. That'll work out perfectly. But what I'm running now is a zero offset wheel, and I do have let's see if I can zoom in here, a Summit off-road, get the focus there we go, 1 inch, I guess 30 millimeter spacer, which effectively puts the entire wheel offset at -30. And they don't make too many wheels with a -30 offset. It's usually, -25, -38 for some of the more aggressive stance setups. So that's kind of what I started with. And initially I got a set of 33s, 285/70 17 Falcon Wild Peak mud terrains. They're a great tire. They lasted me about 38,000 miles before they started to give me some whirring on the freeway, and I just knew it was time to change them up. So the next thing we're going to be talking about is tires. Keep in mind that before I went to this tire size, I was still running before I went to this tire size that I'll be talking about in just a sec, I was still running the Vector 6 wheels, 17 by 8.5, 0 offset, no issues. So I think it's no secret that I think the golden standard for Toyota Tacomas, is specifically the 3rd gen, now the 4th gen's out and it fits 35s perfectly, is to run 35s. And for the longest time, I made a whole video as to why I didn't end up going that route, but I really wanted 35s. I still think about going to 35s all the time. But the way that this vehicle handles on-road is awesome. So for tires, what I ended up with was a Mickey Thompson Baja Boss all-terrain. It is a 295 7017, or as Mickey Thompson puts on their website, it is a 34 by 12. So it's a 12-inch wide tire, 34 inches tall, roughly. And so when I really got to thinking about it, I was like, well, if 35 is 35 by 12.5, so you're only getting about half an inch wider in diameter. And that is, from an optics standpoint, you won't be able to really tell. And I knew that those measurements that they place online aren't really true to spec. Some 35s are going to run bigger, some are going to run smaller. BFG, for example, they always run a little bit smaller, closer to probably what this size actually measures out to be. So I measured this out to be about, in reality, it's probably about a 33.5. Their site says 33.9, I think. And some 35s measure out to be about 34.5. So we're talking, you know, half an inch to 3/4 of an inch at most in difference. And the more I saw these on other Tacomas, the more I began to say, you know what, that's exactly the look I want, the weight I want, and I won't have to really cut out anything too badly in the wheel well. Speaking about wheel well and what you have to do to fit these is, you can see here I have quite an aggressive cab mount chop. I did trim back and hammer back that pinch weld, and then you can't really tell here, but I did cut that out. Sorry, my mic's chopping on my shirt here, but I did cut a little bit there, and it's pretty unnoticeable. And I really, that's one of the reasons I went with this tire size, is I really wanted to keep things looking clean in here. People will throw in 35s and start hacking up their stock fenders. I really like the way the stock fenders look. They make a C4 larger tire kit, which makes everything look OEM to a certain degree. You do have to cut a big piece of the fender off here. Sorry for the sun flare. But that's not something I necessarily wanted to do. So one of the first reasons that I wanted to go this route is that I didn't really want to have to hack up too much. Now, again, I do also have the Viper cut here, which a lot of people love when they see it on my truck. I did that initially as just an additional add-on to some work that was being done on the cab mount shop, but as you can see, there's going to be no issues clearing these. And even if you opted to get these tires with the appropriate lift that we'll talk about here in a sec, you won't really have to, you know, trim up too much or need like an aftermarket bumper of any kind. So when we're talking about things you can't see on the vehicle, I knew I wanted to keep as much of my fuel economy as possible. When I first threw on the 33s, before I even had the bed rack, the rooftop tent, even basically nothing on the truck was modified except for the lift and the tires, I dropped probably around 3 miles per gallon, which is expected, but we're still talking maybe 16 miles per gallon, which is great. That's like unheard of for this guy now. But these tires, for the size, they're fairly light. You can get tires that are rated to be a little bit less heavy, so like a 6-ply or a 5-ply, whatever lower plies are. This is a 10-ply tire, but it weighs under 100 pounds and significantly lighter than some of the other 295 34-inch tires that are made on the market. I'm sure a lot of you will, as I get into some of these details, dispute that in the comments, but that was my thing. I wanted a tire that, for the aesthetics and like an optics perspective, looked as big as possible. Maybe even people asking, hey, is that a 35? It has happened. And no, it's a 34. It weighs, pounds less than a true 35. And that's exactly what I was looking for. And for someone who dailies their vehicle, if you're curious, I get about, on a good day, close to 15 miles per gallon. Right now, I've been driving it on the full tank of gas for about half the tank, and I think I'm averaging about 13.8, so about 14 miles per gallon, which isn't bad. It's not bad at all. I'm not unhappy about that at all. But again, these are things, weight, diameter, width, things I really wanted to think about when choosing which tire I wanted to go with for the long haul. And I think I'll probably end up getting another pair of these later on down the road. But speaking of tires that I wanted to go with long term, I knew that when I got upgraded these tires, after having run the Icon Vector 6 wheels with the 295s, I knew that I didn't want to buy a whole new set of tires. And so that's why I opted for the Summit Spacers, is because they allowed me to actually clear the upper control arm, along with a few other things that make it a little easier to fit this size tire. And so that's why I ended up going with those spacers. People have told me time and time again, hey, don't wheel your truck with spacers. It's dangerous. It's not. The spacers are designed, especially if you go through a reputable brand, to go on these trucks. They serve a purpose. And I know tons of friends that I've met over the years, people over on Instagram who I've grown to, have some sort of a working friendship relationship with, who've also run spacers, and they have no problems at all. There's probably more guys out there with Tacomas built like this that run spacers and you would have no idea because you just have never bothered to ask. So for me, the reason I like having the spacers in the Vector 6 with the zero offset is I now, without spending an extra $1,000, $2,000 on wheels, can change up the size of the spacer if I really wanted to. This specific setup with a final offset of -30 is perfect. It's like that sweet spot that you find that doesn't create too much rubbing with the scrub radius. It gives it that proper wide stance that you like, or at least most of us like. And so having that flexibility is ideal for me. I spend a lot of time on the road, a lot of time dailying this. Some people don't daily their trucks as much, but for me, it's definitely something that I considered before, dropping an unnecessary amount of money on wheels that I would then be locked in with a specific offset. Although, granted, I see wheels all the time where I'm like, dang, that looks really good. I might want to get a pair of those. But I got this set of wheels knowing that that's the set that I really wanted and that I loved the look of, and I'm not sick of looking at them at all. Another reason why I did not go with 35s, there's a video about this. I didn't want to re-gear. It seems like a lot of work for someone who isn't going to be wheeling too much all the time. And so I didn't want to re-gear. As I mentioned, my miles per gallon is still pretty decent, still about 13 to 15, depending on in-town, freeway, whatever it is. And so yeah, I could re-gear later on down the road, but for right now, and my recommendations for someone who's just getting into this and they want their truck to look like this and have the stance this has, and the tires and the wheels and offset and suspension, I'm trying to be as prescriptive as possible. So yeah, not re-geared, and that was another big contributor to why I think this is probably the best setup that you can do if you're just trying to keep it as tame as possible. One thing that no one talks about, and that I'm going to talk about right now, is tire pressure. Freeway driving, you want it to be as high as possible. I get that. But you can really dial in exactly the tire pressure you need. And this is actually not related to this setup at all. This is just a general word of advice from myself. I typically run because California is usually pretty warm-ish year-round. I like to run anywhere from 33 cold to 35 hot. You know, my dealership just the other day put in 45 PSI on my tires, and I was like, that's atrocious. The road really rough, nothing that I couldn't fix. I just got the Morphlate out and kind of aired everything out. But sorry, some crazy birds over here making crazy noises. But yeah, so if you're curious what I run PSI wise, I have received a few comments on Instagram pretty recently asking me. So it's good to know that other people are actually thinking about these kinds of things. Yeah, 33 cold, 35 hot, because you really want to get that even tire wear. If you run a higher pressure, you're going to be more susceptible to cupping or you know, any sort of uneven tire wear, especially on mud terrains. All terrains, I'm not experiencing it as much, but definitely something I'm considering and keeping an eye on when kind of going through day-to-day life. I know we're like a portion of the way through the video, but I will caveat this. If you are enjoying this so far, don't forget to give this video a like, subscribe to the channel for more informative videos like this. And I know it's a little bit of a rambly video, but I think a lot of this is things that you all have asked for. So I'm going to try to get into as much detail as possible, cover my bases. And if there's anything I missed at the end, you can drop them in the comments down below. Always happy to answer those. So let's get back into it. All right, so the final piece of the puzzle here is going to be suspension setup. Now this is going to be to each their own. I am running a Icon Stage 10, I believe. That's going to have these 700-pound springs, CDC reservoirs, SPC upper control arms. That's an add-on feature. And in the back, for those of you who are new to the channel, I am running a Icon RXT leaf pack, which is rated for 600 pounds. That's a little overkill. If you don't have any of this going on, you probably don't need that. But the main reason that you would want to go at least with a stage, you know, 2 or 4 kit from Icon, King, Fox, whatever it is you definitely want to get yourself more than a 2-inch lift. I know it's really easy. I did it myself to go out the gate and go with a kit like Bilstein. They're great kits. They do exactly what they're intended to do. But for me to fit a tire size like this, I knew I needed to get just a little bit of lift. And by a little bit of lift, I don't mean a little bit of lift to begin with. I mean a little bit of lift more than your standard leveling kit. So I'm currently sitting up from, you know, total suspension lift about 2.75, probably on the adjusted collar in the front, and 2.75 inches in the rear. I think I could go a little bit lower. I'm a big fan of keeping center of gravity low. I like the truck to look low with bigger tires. If I went to 35s, I'd actually have to lift it a little higher. But I like the idea of having everything low. But for comfortability, for longevity, for how you want to build your truck maybe long term, it's definitely something you might want to think about. If you're dailying your truck, Icon is probably one of the more affordable options you can go with. And they've served me well. I've had them on there for a year and had nothing bad to say about them. I also have extended travel, which does help a little bit more off-road, but at any rate. So another thing that you're going to need, and I think you'll want to consider if you want to run kind of your ideal daily overland wheel and tire setup. All right, so long story long, this is my suspension and tire wheel setup. Again, we'll start from the very beginning. It is a 17-inch by 8.5 wide wheel with a 0 offset. I have a -30 or 30 millimeter spacer in there. A lot of times you find them in, you know, 1.25 inches. That's too big. I think that's going to give you way too much poke. You're going to run into a lot more rubbing issues. So if you can find one that's, you know, 1 inch, you know, roughly, I think these are actually technically like 29 point somethings. It's a 30 millimeter spacer. That's the sweet spot for me. And it gives you the flexibility to change that later on. If you later on decide, hey, I got to get a smaller tire, and you want to, sink in a little bit, you can take the spacers off and run that wheel and tire setup. So flexibility with that is going to be key. The second is the 295/70 17 tire. The tire sizes is not all that matters. Make sure you're thinking about weight. Weight is a big one. Go on all the websites, compare weights of different size tires, and then look at overall diameter. You can find a 295/70 17 from certain brands, and they're tiny. They could be even smaller than a 285. It's totally happens all the time. But if you look close enough, you'll be able to find that some brands actually make tires that have, a bigger sidewall, a bigger overall profile. Mickey Thompson, Baja Boss All-Terrains, they do that. They're a big tire. They are really nice. They're really aggressive, and it's exactly everything I needed out of a all-terrain tire that wasn't quite at that 35 level, because if I'm being honest, I don't need it. I don't need it as much. I'm not out there wheeling full-time. I'm not there overlanding full-time. I just wanted something that looked really aggressive, was quiet, was light, didn't affect my miles per gallon as much, and overall just gave me a really nice stance with the wheels and the spacers combined. And then finally, suspension. Get yourself a, quote unquote 3-inch lift. If you want to go with a 2-inch lift, you're going to have to do a lot of that cutting that I was talking about not having to do. I wanted to keep cutting to a minimum. I wanted things to look nice under there. I didn't want it to look like a hack job, like the tires did the trimming for me. That's something I just really wanted to avoid. This is my daily driver. My wife has a RAV4. You've probably seen on the channel a few times. We have that as well. But for all intents and purposes, I needed to keep this thing as functional on road and then more functional off road. But so yeah, 3-inch lift, 2.75 the way I have it set up right now. If you can go lower, awesome. Trucks always look a little silly to me when they're lifted super high, if they don't run like 37s or something on there. There we have it, you guys. So that was my wheel, tire, suspension setup, and why I think it's the most ideal setup for a daily driver overland rig. Like I said at the beginning, if you run 35s, good for you. I'm kind of jealous. If you run 37s, good for you. But one thing I really just wanted to stress is you don't need to go all out. Don't do, certain things without doing your research. The internet is full of opinions and false information. Sometimes it's correct information, but they don't always give you the exact details of what you're getting yourself into. Excuse me. And so that's why I try to come in and create videos like this that kind of provide a little bit of added clarity in terms of what people are really trying to get out of their rigs, because I think that these are awesome trucks. You just got to be very careful with what you add to them, how much weight you add to them. You don't want to be putting too much stress on parts. I will say, I'm very happy to report I have converted quite a few people already to these Mickey Thompson Baja Boss all-terrain tires in this exact tire size. And that's, awesome for me. It's awesome for Mickey Thompson. So yeah, a few friends of mine are going to get them next. A few acquaintances of mine already got them or are in the process of potentially buying them. So I'm happy to hear that some of what I kind of convey in some of my other videos, when I've also referenced this tire setup, wheel, tire, suspension setup, has gone a long way. So at any rate, like I said, lots of rambling. But yeah, if you're new to the channel, welcome. Trying to get back into the flow of things. Usually do one video every 1 to 2 weeks. I got a few backed up right now, so it might be a little bit more than that in the coming weeks. But get subscribed, like this video, drop a comment down below, and until next time, enjoy the ride.